It's like, that's not the point. The point is not to get rich. The point is to get free. If it's because he talked about this this fantastic situation that's going on with Tornado Cash.
Yeah.
And I've seen you guys post a few links in the Submit CTT links room. I guess we can get onto that next. But I wonder if he's mentioned Tornado Cash and the legacy system's cracking down hard on it because it thinks that's the right thing to do. So if he's mentioned that in one of his blogs and they've shut down his YouTube account, it's just so ridiculous. So yeah, I see. I guess let's get into a little bit about what you wanted to talk about a little bit later on. But let's talk about this because it's kind of a hot issue at the moment. You know, this Tornado Cash thing. And I know Dan's put a few things in the room. Brian in London has as well. So let's bring up a couple of these tweets. The latest one that I can see here is from Brian of London, where Alex and Omega has tweeted, Justin Suntron, Aave, and Tornado Cash and Stani Kulishov. 1. Identify all major loans on Aave and plan possible liquidation cascade. 2. Send ETH from Tornado Cash to all wallets with major loans. 3. Let Aave block all wallets. 4. Short ETH. 5. Initiate dump. 6. Watch liquidation cascade and nobody can do shit about it. And then the other one was Sun just said, I'm officially blocked from Aave since someone sent me 0.1 ETH randomly from Tornado Cash. So this is like, I just love the ultimate troll that's going on here, you know? And it's going to force people away from these systems because even if they receive 0.1 ETH and they're like victims of a scam, right? They didn't do anything. But I think that's actually really cool because now they are compromised. They've got the 0.1 ETH in their accounts. And if they then move anything out of that account, because it's fungible, they are effectively moving that 0.1 ETH, and that is what's classed as an issue in the US government. So it's even going to force these people to look for alternatives, even though they weren't part of it initially, and they've received this stuff by kind of indirectly. So yeah, it's an interesting time. There's a couple of other things that you've put above as well, Dan. I guess we can get onto those separately, but I don't know if you want to comment on the situation in general.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we see that Uniswap, Balance, and all of these apps very quickly added that OPAC list, or that, you know, the blacklist basically, and they all did it unilaterally, and now it's basically it's a chess move. The ball's in our court. They made their move. What are we going to do? We're already seeing their attack. The attack is, if you do this, it's illegal and you'll go to jail. So, you know, and we saw that coming for a long time because that's really the only attack they have. Well, aside, if you're talking censorship-resistant platforms, you know, you're going to see this war on software developers in the major countries. And what has to be of utmost importance to everyone right now is to have distributed nodes for the base layer, right? Tornado Cash is protected by Ethereum. It's just software, right? You can send the developers to jail, but it could be forked and all that. The only way to truly stop it is to stop the base layer, to get enough nodes that can censor transactions. Once you start hearing of base layer protocols adding these types of lists into the core code, those lists, they might be quote unquote temporary. They're not temporary. Once they go on, they don't come off, right? If you're willing to put them in now, there's nothing that's going to get easier down the road where you'll say, let's take them off now. If you can't stand the heat now, it's going to be way hotter in the future. So what people are folding now is the inevitable future, the foundation of the way they're going to go. So we really have to make sure, you know, you can easily see them come into some of these top blockchains. Tornado Cash, yeah, they funneled a lot of money, but how much money is funneled through all of these other chains? We really don't know, and I'm sure they're going to start telling us. And then they're going to start saying, oh, well, if you run this type of validator, or if you send transactions to these people, this is going to go for Bitcoin as well, you're illegal. We're going to come arrest you. And you're going to have enough nodes in countries where they can't do that, and enough anonymity to survive that. So there might be a developer purge for a lot of these VC-run chains, because VCs are usually in big countries that this is going to be prominent in. So you're basically going to have a big wash of the VC chains, because all of them are, no VC's taking an arrow for you. You best to believe that. They're not going to say, yeah, freedom of speech, I'll go to jail for that. No, they're not going to move to another country. They like it exactly where they are. So, you're going to see, as we saw before, or as we're talking about a long time ago, these validators are going to start censoring. It's inevitable. Like, I don't know why people are trying to beat around the bush. People understand that this is the top layer. The next attack is on the base layer nodes. I mean, that's just what it is. So I just see it as, I know a lot of people, everyone's like, it's so classic. Everyone's always, everyone now, the fire's on their asses. Oh, we all got to decentralize. We got to get rid of the VCs. We got to be, distributed technology. It's like, dude, where were you 2 years ago? Like, why does the fire have to literally be burning you for you to understand what was inevitable? And in hindsight, anyone could see coming from a mile away. That's why the protocols that really are taking this seriously, right? It's the sprint. It's a marathon, not a sprint. They're going to be able to be sustainable and keep their legs up and actually have true value they can offer in the future. But these, chains with these lists on them are going to be either connected to banks and basically payment processors for governments, or they're going to be completely useless. Because a blockchain without censorship resistance, it's only useful to either a tyrant or no one. So.
Yeah, no, fair play. Fair play. I like your points there. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're going to get to a point where, if someone sends 0.1 ETH to your account, you're in the shit if you move that money. So you're going to have to leave. You're going to have to leave the jurisdiction. But it depends on how deep you are into this, how committed you are to it. I'm certainly ready. I'm ready to go wherever I need to go to keep this going. I just don't see how you get around this now. I don't see how the governments are going to relax off this. They're starting to chip away at the armor, and they're seeing an easy win here.
Well, let me throw this out to the both of you, especially you, Dan, what you just said, which is a logical path to follow. What happens when we get to that point and there are those lists at base layer? Does everybody fall, in your opinion, do most fall into compliance, or is that where alternatives such as Hive are going to be sought out even more?
Crypto in general, you'll see 95% plus of people fall in line. You'll see the Bitcoins, you'll see the Hives give the last great fight. It becomes whether it's possible or not. Could any one government come to Hive and say, we want you to block all of these lists and we want you to put into the core code? Does anyone here think that would fly? Yes, some developers, some witnesses might fall off because it's too hot for me. I can't, I'm in a wrong jurisdiction. But we have many, many backups in many, many different countries. Me personally, as a betting man, I would bet that there's not one line of code they could change on our blockchain. They just couldn't do it. It wouldn't get consensus. There wouldn't be enough people to say, oh, yeah, exactly. There wouldn't be enough people to say, oh, yeah, let's vote for the witnesses that are going to add the censored transactions. Because, once you give them an inch, once you give them a pinky, the whole thing's over. They got you. They got you by the balls. And we understand that very well on Hive. So we would be the ones to not give an inch. And Bitcoin's in a tough spot, right? Because you do have staking pools or mining pools. And a lot of these mining pools are in big countries. And if the government came to these mining pools and started saying, we already saw this on a small scale. It wasn't a government, though. It was a mining pool stepping up and saying, hey, we're going to block these transactions. And then they got trolled and, they got flooded with all kinds of things. They couldn't handle it. And they pretty much realized, okay. But that's something not to ignore. If a government now came and said, hey, you have to block these addresses. With Bitcoin, you have the pseudonymous address and you can get a new address every time. So, it's going to be a cat and mouse game. But that's the way they're going to try it, obviously. They're going to try the big, we're just going to roll you over. So they're going to knock in all these staking pools and be like, look, we know we really can't tell 100% what's going on, but we're on your ass. And if you slip up and if we find that you're sending to addresses that you shouldn't, you're going to jail. You're out of it. What's going to happen when you have two of the largest three mining pools that start adding lists into, it's not the core code, but it's the gatekeepers, it's the bouncers at the door. It's the miners saying, no, we will not process your transaction. That's going to be an attack on Bitcoin that I'm very interested to see how it handles. You know, I get excited when I see this, because this is what it's all about.
Yeah.
You don't train to fight over and over again and then never fight. Like, you want the fight. You want a good fight. I want to see, you know, that we've been building, we've been game theorizing. Let them come. Let's see where our weaknesses are. Sooner than later would be better. But yeah, I see Bitcoin and Hive, and then on top of that, any sort of community-run project that has a strong enough root without a centralized, you know, they have that little heartbeat. They're also in the category too. But anything with a centralized point of failure, anything with even remotely a centralized point of failure, anything that could even just throw a dent to kind of get it off target is going to be attacked and pushed. And so this is going to be the great fight back, and we're going to see what communities have them in or not. And this is when what me and Starkers like to say, founderless projects can happen. Because what happens when a community forks a project? Well, there is no founder, because everyone is the founder. There's no one, that's the key. There's no one founder. There's no one entity that controls the chain. When you can get to that point, you're in a very good spot. And then it's just about, you know, being a digital nomad, knowing the countries you are in. I know a lot of people can't get up and move. It is what it is. But a lot of people can. And there's enough that can to keep the chain moving.
Yeah, I just want to add that to go into this in a little bit more detail for the people that don't fully understand it on the call listening to this. What you've got on Hive is you've got 20 elected witnesses who are elected by the community with their stake. And those 20 people are the people in charge of running the chain. So if they're forced to run code by a government somewhere that says you're not allowed to run code that doesn't block these accounts, for example, or doesn't do X, Y, Z, and then they run the code that the government requests, you know what's happening to my vote, right? You're getting unelected immediately, right? And then the
hard
same
fork
for
27 by the U.S. government. Who's going to accept that hard fork?
Yeah, exactly. The USA government hard fork. It's not going to happen, right? So, I mean, it might happen, but there's going to be another chain spring up from it. I mean, ultimately, that and then what happens? Yeah, let's say all the top 20 in Hive were in the USA, right? They're located in the USA. Not that we know where half of them are located as it is, right? Which is great. We've got Osbit Bank, for example, on this channel. Very difficult to find out where the hell that guy is. There's a few other people. I mean, what's going to happen is, let's say they do have to comply. The government locates them and forces them to comply, right? They run the code the government wants, and then they get unelected. They drop out the top 20, and a new member of the top 20 comes in. If that member is outside the US government, outside the US jurisdiction, then great. What they're going to do? We're just going to switch to that set of nodes, and we'll basically whittle it down so that the nodes that are elected in are the nodes that can run as the community wishes and not as a governmental jurisdiction wishes. A lot of the other chains can't do that because, as Dan was saying, because of these founder supplies, they have a centralized point of attack that they can go to and say, hey, you do this, otherwise we're going to send you to prison. And then they've got the stake to do something about it. So they actually get the things run on chain, or like Dan says, the mining pools do the same thing. You know, there's place they can go with a gun to their head and say, hey, you run this list, right? Don't process transactions from this list. You do that on Hive, you're getting elected out. You know, it's as simple as that. And there is no
that's the power of
you know,
DPoS.
2 or 3 years ago they could have done it because well, just to finish this thought, 2 or 3 years ago they could have done it on Steam because they could have gone to Ned Scott on Steam and said, hey, you've got a shit ton of Steam, do what we want, otherwise we're going to do X, Y, Z. And he would have been able to elect validators in that are running the code that the government wants. But now that stake's been removed on Hive, on the fork, it's almost impossible. I don't see how they do it.
Yeah, I mean, DPoS, one of the major features is the fact that if one witness goes down, a bunch are ready to pop up in the back. You don't have that on other networks, and that's critically key. It's absolutely fundamental when you think about it, because what happens when the 2 or 3 top staking pools or mining pools do add the list? Well, how are you going to knock those guys out? Who's going to be the backups? Right? So it's fundamental to be able to knock someone out and have a backup that's automatically ready to come back in. If you don't have that, you're already crippled, because now you're at a severe disadvantage and you have so much reliance on those top pools that it's like they're almost gods of the chain at that point. There's not one person on Hive that can say that, because if they mess around, they will get voted out and they will be instantly replaced. So, it's just another reason why Hive is really built for this. I think you could easily see 90% of the witnesses become compromised, or I think a lot of witnesses would just stop being a witness before they became compromised. I don't see people just saying, "Oh, okay, I'll run the list." They'll say, "Look, I'm just not doing it anymore. It's not worth it. I'm not going to ruin my reputation."
They'd step down.
It's not like the government's going to pay them to run this list. So it's like they're not making enough to be a top witness to just be like that, to ruin their reputation literally forever. There's no coming back from being a list, carrying that list on your node. So I think what would happen is you would see, if there was a big attack, let's say worst case scenario, let's say 90% of the witnesses just step down. They're like, nope, I'm not going to do it. Hive would still survive, because with that 10%, we could build it new. And another one point that's very critical, if anyone sees we're being attacked and sees like, holy shit, they're still standing, they're holding their own, it's win to our sails. Then you're going to get people from everywhere, all over, who wanting to run nodes, wanting to get a part of this cause. And that's not guesswork. We've seen that with the Steam Hostile takeover. So many people joined that weren't a part of it because they're rooting us on, because they don't want to see a peaceful community be bullied. Now, that was an entity, Justin Sun. Imagine a government. They're not really liked these days. If a government's going around trying to bully and crush a peaceful community, you're going to see people from all over the world want to join this if they think there's a chance to win. If they don't think there's a chance to win, no one's going to join. But if we can stand up and we can take a few blows, people will be like, wow, they're serious. We can actually do this. Plant that seed. We can actually do this seed, and you'll have a community that won't quit.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are going to happen here. If the witnesses are put in that position and they are located in a jurisdiction that requires them to run dodgy government code or to accept dodgy government rules, before they get voted out, they will step down. I'm pretty sure of that. They'll just say, look, we can't do this, we're stepping down. And where and if they can, they will just relocate to a new location that's outside of that jurisdiction and just say, well, we've popped up here, we're running here now, vote us back in. And they'll probably get elected straight back in. The thing will just realign. And this is the thing that the governments need to understand. There is no point in attacking this in this way, because you are going to come off looking the fool and you'll make the system stronger by default. So the system's weak as it is without you attacking, right? If you attack it, it will just double up and get stronger. So I'm like, bring it on. It's like the same with Justin Sun. When Justin Sun took over Hive, over Steam, everyone was worried. And of course, there was worry and concern and misunderstanding and excitement and all that stuff. But ultimately, it didn't matter what the hell happened. The community still came off stronger. Yeah, it doesn't make any difference, right? So I'm the same as you, Dan. I'm like, welcome it. I'm like, bring it on, because this is the rare occasion in the world with this phenomena, the way DPoS is set up, that if it's attacked, it just adapts and becomes stronger. So great, and you get those organic attacks happening. Great.
Mm-hmm. One of the big.
By the way, I see Danny Shime's request here. I've read your comment. We'll answer it.
Just quickly on this point. One of the big attacks I see a government doing, or just agencies around the world, is right now. An enemy is the biggest shield, right? If you're anonymous and you can block your location, like you're way ahead. That's really good. I'm not saying it's necessary, but we're going to need it. You're going to need a balance of docs and undocs. Well, there's a very, very, very big attack vector, because all of these anonymous people who have millions of followers and they have all this trust built up and they're thought leaders, they're all standing on quicksand. They all have Twitter. They all have YouTube. What happens if those accounts get taken over from the inside and they act the same, they say sort of the same things, but then they start saying some weird shit like we should accept the government code? Well, you don't know anymore, because you don't think Twitter doesn't work with the governments? You're out of your mind. It's already been proven. You don't think Facebook, you don't think all of these people are in cahoots. And if you don't think that's possible, and the governments do stuff like this all the time. So it's very important to be able to be anonymous and have an account that we know it's you. If you have those two, then you have a validator that can remain anonymous. But right now, there's a huge attack vector. There's so many prominent anonymous people that I follow, that I respect. But am I going to know who they are in 2 years? I'm not going to know. There's going to come a point where overnight, if you're on Twitter, we don't trust you. It's over. It's all that social currency you built, it's gone. It's out the window. And since you're anonymous, how can you prove who you are on a new account? You can't, because you're anonymous. So you literally lose your identity forever. That's what people are looking at right now.
You lose a legitimate identity for sure. And this is also interesting because you're talking about the way that some of these people are starting to shift, and you're not quite sure what they're saying exactly. They've flip-flopped a little bit and changed their mind. So what do you hear now, right? 5 years ago, Bitcoin was all like, fuck you, regulation. We're all fucking going to have Bitcoin without regulation. Woohoo, we're having a party, right? And there's nothing the government can do about it. Now, you see the narrative has flipped. Somehow they've done it. It's actually quite impressive, right, over the last couple of years. But the narrative now is, let's get regulation into crypto, and then it opens the doors for all these other money to come flowing in, and the price goes up, and you guys get rewarded because you get rich. And it's like that's not the point. The point is not to get rich. The point is to get free. You know, we need freedom. We need digital freedom, and the money will follow later. And so all these people are going to start selling out their principles, and they already have, to allow so-called regulation to happen. And this will be used as an example, right? This situation with Tornado Cash, why we need to regulate more. So even though they can't regulate the base layer of Bitcoin, there will, the sentiment's changing to the point where, you've got the Michael Saylor now, this so-called CEO of Bitcoin, calling for regulation, and everyone follows him and does what he says he thinks is amazing, calling for these like crackdowns on regulation to make sure that the money can flow in. And it's like, that is not where we were 5 years ago. That sentiment's changed. But the difference is on chains like Hive, that sentiment cannot change. It's like it's community run, and the community governs the chain. So if you're going to start bringing a Michael Saylor on that's going to talk about, the Hive price is going to pump because we're going to bring regulation in and all this stuff, it's like, okay, Saylor, let's do it, because you're not going to be able to do it. We're just going to vote people out that take part in it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at all of Hive witnesses as staking pools, then you start to clearly see what an advantage we have. If anyone tried to approach any one of the staking pools, they could not corrupt the entire system like they could on another system. And if you're talking about, okay, you cannot change. Let's say you're never touching the Ethereum base code, you're never touching Bitcoin base code. But what does that matter when you control 95% of the centralized infrastructure? What does that matter when Uniswap, Balancer, every major app that has all the liquidity add this list? And a reason they can do this is because people allowed VC-run, quote-unquote, side chains to rule the world in crypto, where on Hive you don't have that problem. You don't need a VC-run side chain. That means you have incentivized infrastructure. That means on Hive, it'll never get to the point where 95% of the infrastructure is centralized. And if that one infrastructure was to add a list, sure, you have your 5%, and people are like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to host our own front ends. And we're going to do it on IPFS, and everyone's cheering. We know in practice they're going to get squandered. They're like 5 lifeboats trying to compete against the Titanic. It doesn't work. You have to change the system to where it can. Once you have 95%, 90% of the infrastructure centralized, it's over. You fucked up. You can't throw a Band-Aid on that. So people have to start to understand fast feeless base layer, efficient, cheap to run side chains, incentivization for off-chain heavy data. Oh, now we have something on theory that actually can function in practice without needing a VC, to where it can't be corrupted 90% by one organization. Infra. What's going to happen when they add the list if they haven't already? Well, that's Ethereum. Yeah, you can fork, or you can run another RPC node or whatever, but let's see that in practice, because it just doesn't happen. Now without the incentives.
Yeah. Well, I want to make this clear, because you talk about this a lot, Dan, and there's a couple of new people in the room today, and I want to make this clear. So the point that we're trying to make is that on things like the Lightning Network, where the infrastructure has no incentivization, they are inherently incentivized to mine people's data and provide low fees and undercut the fees, right? So what are you going to get? You're just rebuilding Web 2, the Web 2 business model of Apple coming in and mining people's data and providing free services. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get Lightning Network, where the majority of the nodes with the traffic are going to be just low price nodes So people can send really, really, really cheap. They don't make any money off the nose, but they make money off KYC in your data or selling your data and things like this. And there'll be just the standard Web 2.5, Web 2 business models in there, where there's the Twitter bosses, the Apple bosses. They'll all be setting up things, the JP Morgan banks. They're the people that are going to dominate unincentivized infrastructure. Whereas on things like the Speak Network and Hive, the infrastructure is incentivized and it's elected in by the community. So it can't be, the community is never going to, if Apple comes to Hive and says, hey, we want to run a node, yeah, maybe they can run a node, but it ain't going to get voted in by the community. The community will elect community members to run the infrastructure,
Yep.
and this is the input. And that works because you can incentivize the infrastructure. On Bitcoin, you can't incentivize the infrastructure apart from the miners, right? The mining nodes. But in order to have other types of infrastructure running, the Bitcoin maxis refuse that. They reject it. They don't want to incentivize that infrastructure. Whereas our argument is you have to incentivize that infrastructure so that it can stay alive and be just like a guy in his room that's a member of the community, right? So it's not some big conglomerate company that can be compromised. It's a dude that's elected in by the community, some small guy that's earning enough money to break even or make some money. Yeah, if you don't incentivize that infrastructure, that guy's got no incentive and he can't keep a sustainable business going to run his node. So now you're going to hand it over to Apple and back to Web 2.5.
Yeah, it's just a broken. They're putting a heart where a lung should go, and they're trying to make it work. In terms of first of all, you need a censorship-resistant incentive layer that can do both heavy and micropayments. You cannot have a two-tiered system where the micropayments are less secure than the big payments. They're just as important, arguably more important. So if you have a fast feeless,
certainly for social media.
And for infrastructure provision and being an incentive layer, because some people earn pennies at a time, some people earn dollars at a time. Once you have that, then you can scale outwards. If you envision Hive and you envision the arrows going out from Hive to the other layers, it's acting as a base layer, as an incentive system to then scale a moat all around it so it's protected. If you look at something like Ethereum, you see the arrows are pointing inwards. That means the outside moat is trying to be the incentive layer for the main chain. Well, it's ass backwards because the moat doesn't have its own protection. It's supposed to be protected. So if you don't have a natural base layer of security, your second layer needs to be a layer one. And that's the chicken and the egg, because that just keeps happening, right? It's like if you need to keep having layer one security, you can never truly have a sidechain. So that's the big problem here is the reason they have centralized infrastructure is because the base layer cannot act as an incentive system. Thus, no incentives. The only people that are going to do it are people who have their own self-interest, whatever that may be. Usually government agencies trying to control at the end of the day. That's usually the end game. Whereas in Hive, we can actually have infrastructure that is incentivized in a decentralized way, so we don't have to rely on centralized infrastructure. That's the main difference.
Speak Network, baby.